listeners, to the Mindful Journey podcast. I'm your host, Sana, as always. And, listeners, we all know, our minds, they hold our memories, our creativity, a sense of self. And yet, in the rush of daily life, we rarely pause to ask, what are we doing to protect and nourish this incredible organ for the long run? Now, today, for this conversation, we are going to step into a topic that touches every one of us. Guess what? Brain health and cognitive longevity. Now, for many, cognitive decline, it feels inevitable, almost like a fade. But science and lived experience suggests otherwise. The way we live, heal, and even how we interpret past experiences may hold the keys to unlocking longer, sharper, more resilient mental health. Yeah, it's a good news. And listeners, my guest today has created a first of its kind program that reframes mental disorders not as lifelong labels, but as effects of past causes that can be healed and released. So, we'll be exploring brain health not just through the lens of science, but through stories of transformation and hope. And listeners, meet my incredible guest, Ryan Williamson. So, Ryan, welcome to the show, and I'm really honored to have you here with us.
Oh, thank you, Sana. I'm very happy to be here.
Super. Very interesting topic. And I think uh, especially in perspective of aging, or sometimes because of any traumatic experience, we often talk about that our cognitive ability or brain health, it's inevitable, it's going to decline, and sometimes we feel like helpless. And I believe not only with science but through lived experiences, we are definitely humanizing the science here, so that it can reach to the to every person out there, not just ones who are uh, able to easily access it. So Ryan, with that, when people hear cognitive longevity, it can sound like a heavy word, like technical or medical concept. So how do you personally define brain health, and why should it matter to everyday people?
These are great and deep questions, Sana. Um, so, br- without a brain, right? To state the obvious, we can't do a whole lot. It's as simply as I can put it.
Yeah.
Um, our brain is the organ and the place and the processor where we interpret and decode everything
Mm.
that's happening in the world around us. And without that operating at full capacity, or at least close to it, the experiences of life are far less rich. And you imagine we have eyes that bring light into our mind. We have sensory receptors in our skin and our various organs and tissues that give us real time information about what's going on outside of our bodies and inside our bodies, smell, taste, hearing, and so on. All
Mhm.
of that is processed in your brain. And you have to interpret and figure out what all of these things mean and how you are interacting with the outside world and other people and how this fits in with your own goals, hopes, dreams, aspirations, and so forth. And, I think we maybe take that for granted because it's just something that happens every second
Yeah.
of every day. As we get to talk on podcasts and read books and interact with others and do and just sort of do life. But if that is not operating as it should, then we lose the ability to either perform certain tasks that are integral to making us human and feel happy, or we lose the ability to enjoy them at the fullest. And the reason I spend a minute on that is because there are ways to ensure that we can, number one, optimize our performance. And so take whatever most people in my experience, let's say this, are not performing at their maximum. Um,
Mhm.
I think that's unfortunately an outcome of the world that we now live in. It's a world where our social and technological evolution has outpaced our biological evolution, and we are no longer living in a world that is aligned with our biology. And so as a result, as we stress to get more things done and, we lose sleep and we don't have appropriate nutrition, at least in America, we're very sedentary. I don't know if India has the same problem or not. Um,
It is.
Sure. And well, I know at least peripherally that rates of diabetes in India are very high. I mean, so I
Yes.
imagine it has something to do with maybe sedentary behavior or eating delicious Indian food that may not be the most the best for our health, although it tastes great because I do love Indian food. Um, but just the chronic stress and the pressures of the external world, uh, I think, create this environment that again is not conducive to our long-term cognitive and physical health. And so, number one, recognizing that that's where we are, I think, is very important because when we're born, nobody explains that to us. We're just thrown into the world and we just have to kind of figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so understanding the framework, understanding the problem, and then understanding how our minds and our bodies operate and are designed to work so that we can create the space to intentionally incorporate a healthy lifestyle so that we can actually preserve the structure of our brain, the actual literal neural architecture that makes our brain is what makes all these things happen. And in turn, by doing that, we can also keep our bodies healthy so that we can live long, productive lives and just go do the things that we want to do.
Totally. Totally. That's actually very very well put, Ryan. And I've a lot of thoughts to share on this. I mean, first of all, um, people, they would think that I always sound cryptic or maybe negative, but being a '90s kid, I love to say that I'm a millennial. It's actually very, it's a blessing to see a world before technology became this, like it like sipped down into the levels, deepest levels of our lives that, even for ordering groceries, we are just, picking our phones and, just a few clicks and voila, that's it. You got your groceries. Uh, we have machines to cook food as well. I don't know. I just saw somewhere. Anyway, but we have seen a world before the technology, where physically we used to go out, play games. Physically we used to go meet people. Physically we went and invited people for weddings, and uh, physically we had to cook food, cut vegetables, grind the spices and everything. And then right now it's a completely different world where, you know, people are shouting that, there are negative effects. It's kind of an addiction. We are seeing effects on children, and these are some devastating effects that, children at age of just 4 or 5 years, they're getting uh, glasses. Their cognitive abilities are kind of not matching as per the expected, as per their age. Um, then we are becoming aggressive, impatient. We want everything conveniently, very easily. So, not to sound negative, but that's what reality is looking like.
Yes. Yeah, unfortunately, yes. And to your well, go ahead, son. I don't want to interrupt.
No, 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 no. Go ahead, Ryan. Go ahead.
No, I'm
Uh,
to your point though, this highlights the growing and pervasive nature of technology. And not to say that that's all bad, because I think in many ways technology has
mm,
radically improved the
yes.
baseline living conditions of humans around the world. I think this is a good thing in many ways because people are not dying of infectious disease. There are way fewer food shortages, excuse me, than there were even 10 or 15 years ago. But now it seems the problem is more of an overabundance of nutrition in most places. Where we're seeing childhood obesity rates as high as 2/3 or 3/4 in some parts of the world. due to, again, sedentary behavior, improper knowledge of nutrition, and again, it's not just a cosmetic issue or people feeling shameful that they don't look as they should. It's what is happening in the body that causes this cascade of high blood pressure, insulin
Mm,
resistance, increased risk of diabetes, high cholesterol. All of these problems create this, what we call a metabolic syndrome, that leads to chronic diseases that, if they show up ever, cause problems. But if they're showing up earlier and they're present for decades, they do contribute to accelerated physical and cognitive decline. There's zero question about it. And so again, back to this idea that we have gotten away from how we're designed to live and move and eat and communicate and do all of these things. This has created a serious, I mean, really a global crisis, in my opinion, in terms of our mental and our physical health. And I'm also optimistic that people are starting to wake up to that, and that
mhm,
people like you that have the Healthy Mind podcast and and other
mhm,
avenues to help disseminate this information to the world, I think is so critical, because if we don't get ahead of this, I know where it leads, because as having spent a career in medicine where I see the predictable outcome of people that have done this and not lived the right lifestyle, it results in a shortened lifespan and often with multiple debilitating diseases that nobody wants.
mm. That is so true. That is so true. And Ryan, uh, I hate to admit, but I missed this during introducing you to all the listeners. But your life has been shaped by um and both early loss and then extraordinary career in medicine, serving sailors, marines, and special forces. And now you have dedicated yourself to a mission to help civilians live longer, healthier, more impactful lives. And that is really, really honorable, and that's really inspiring. Now, as you mentioned about as we talked about cognitive longevity, about technology, about metabolism, and all these aspects, are there any signs or symptoms that we can identify, or maybe we are ignoring, that might be an early sign that the brain is asking for attention? Like, we often talk about brain rot, brain fog.
Mm.
Sometimes we can't remember what we did a few minutes back, what we ate just an hour back, or sometimes something like this.
All of the above can be signs, and this is the
Oh, okay.
no, sorry, Sana, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was just saying, oh my goodness.
Yeah, yes, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Um, so all of the above can be signs, and one of my biggest challenges with my patients and my clients is that these signs can be very subtle. And number
Mhm.
one, number two, our brain does a very good job of adjusting to whatever circumstance we put it through. So meaning if people find themselves in a maybe a difficult situation day in and day out, or they're chronically feeling tired, or they live with chronic pain, or maybe chronic headaches or something like this, uh, you kind of adjust to whatever that is, and that becomes your new normal.
Mhm.
And it's often not until I shine a spotlight on these issues for people and we actually work on getting some of those problems reeled in, whether it's pain, headaches, depression, whatever, and then people start to feel more like themselves and they go, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea what I
Yeah.
was dealing with," because they'd become so accustomed to this new lower level of performance or increased level of pain or whatever it is. So, I say that to say that it's hard to know sometimes, and people just find themselves trying to get by every day, but it can manifest as irritability, or maybe just feeling a little down, feeling overwhelmed or withdrawn. You mentioned maybe difficulty with processing memory,
Yeah.
difficulty maybe falling asleep or staying asleep.
Yes.
And there's so many avenues and presentations of this, and it really takes a kind of a high level view to look at all of this to know, hey, what's going on. So that's one way, sort of trying to, find it line by line or piece by piece. But another way, I think, at least a practical way that everybody can at least reverse engineer a plan to help themselves feeling better is to know what to do. And how can you incorporate a healthy lifestyle? And I mean, we can go in any direction here you want, but there are really four main pillars that I look at that I encourage people to at least understand and implement, and that's
Mhm.
achieving regular quality sleep, having a quality nutrition plan, integrating purposeful movement into their life every day, and then effectively managing their stress. And again, there are multiple avenues and multiple methods to all of this. But even if you can start with one of those topics and improve just what you're eating or just how you're sleeping, or maybe just, being a little more active, I mean, it very quickly creates this positive snowball effect where you're overcoming the inertia of whatever it is that's holding somebody in this place of again suboptimal brain performance or not feeling their best. And then it's very easy to stack these other habits atop of one another and get to a place where they're thriving and doing so much better and able to bring more of their full selves to the world. Excuse me.
Mhm. Mhm. No, I really loved that you shared uh, the solutions out there, um, because listeners would feel, okay, I know it's a problem, but what are the solutions out there? Everybody will say something different, but I think you really defined in a very well, very structured way that there are four pillars. Especially if I can share something on sleep, I think. We have lot many factors to affect our sleep cycles. Um, I mean, I have heard so many times that how the blue light from your devices, from your laptop or from your phone, how it kind of uh, kind of breaks that circadian rhythm in
Yes.
you. It really damages your sleep cycle. How high sugar foods or fatty foods, they kind of uh, once again increase your hormonal levels, and it really, I'm not able to recollect the names right now, but because I don't want to, share some incorrect information, but it really affects your sleep cycle once again. So it's really good that you mentioned the four pillars in there, and yeah, I would love to know your observations or your thoughts on this, Ryan.
And you're absolutely correct, and all of that is factually correct. For example, you mentioned our circadian rhythm, and this gets back to that original way of living and the way that our biology has developed.
Mhm.
We used to wake up with the sun, and when the sun went down, there was no light to keep us awake, and so naturally we would go to sleep. And
Yes. Mhm.
early one of the things I encourage everybody to do is to get outside the first hour of the day. Number one, to move. So go for a walk with maybe your loved one, or if you have a pet, you can take for a walk, or maybe if you just
Mhm.
want to stand, stretch, do yoga outside. But do it in the sunlight in the early part of the day, because when you do, this actually primes your circadian rhythm to tell your brain and your body that it's time to get itself ready for another day, and that helps with alertness, helps with focus, helps the daytime performance. The movement by activating large muscle groups is also going to help with this, helps with circulation, helps lower your risk of developing other diseases. Again, back to the insulin resistance and all those problems. And as you get towards the end of the day, as that circadian rhythm starts to wind down and prepare your body for sleep, by doing this early in the day, you are actually helping your body achieve better sleep regardless, because it knows that it's time to go into that rest and recovery mode. And sleep is a very active process where, that's the only time our brain actually clears out harmful metabolic debris. In
Mhm.
particular, there's a protein called amyloid that is a byproduct of metabolism that accumulates throughout the day, and sleep is
Mhm.
the only time we clear that out. And the reason I bring that up, because you mentioned this kind of fear of inevitable cognitive decline.
Mhm.
That is one of the two implicated proteins in Alzheimer's. And if you think about not fully clearing that amyloid out, maybe not just tonight or next week, but again, over a period of years or even decades, we start to see changes like memory loss in people that where this accumulates. And if you're not sleeping well, that's a major risk factor and red flag for developing dementia. So getting sleep right is very important. And to your point, Sana, if we're again here we are communicating on computers halfway across the world, which is just fascinating. But when we're laying in bed at night and we're scrolling any variety of social media or even reading for our job or for school or whatever, that those frequencies of light, as you mentioned, mimic that sunlight. And so what you're telling your brain is, hey, it's not actually time to go to sleep. It's still daytime and there's still work to be done, which is a way to maybe trick our minds into staying active for longer. But when it comes to that melatonin release, which is the second hormone that helps us fall asleep and kind of get achieve quality deep sleep, that can be
Mhm.
delayed by several hours, even after just viewing light on a screen for even just a matter of minutes. So this is a real problem with people not being aware of this and just habitually, watching television or looking at their tablet or their smartphone or whatever. Um, so yes, these are very real problems that we all face.
Yeah, we do. We do. I mean, firsthand, I've experienced it. Um, and definitely, I think I really sometimes I'm very, very fearful of memory loss or this forgetfulness. Um, because, it's like I shouldn't say the word, but it's like a slow poison. And
Yes.
we don't, in fact, sometimes realize, or we may not would like to realize because it feels unpleasant to our brain or our heart. So I think once again, I would like to emphasize that, you mentioned that yes, there is hope and it's never too late. And then I would also like to bring in this aspect, that because you have, been in that combat environment, you have worked with military teams, and it has been all about performance at the highest level. So, how has that shaped your understanding of brain health for everyday people?
Yeah. Well, to be clear, I'm not a combat veteran. I've not seen
Okay.
combat, thankfully, but I've worked firsthand with countless patients who have.
Okay.
So for what that's worth, but no, I mean to answer your question, uh, performance in the military is requisite to the job. I mean, that's my job when I was active duty was literally to keep Marines and sailors combat effective. I mean, that's the job, regardless of what type of physician you are. And as a neurologist, I would see anything that had to do with the brain or the spinal cord or the peripheral nerves. And unfortunately, for our servicemen and women, they're exposed regularly to concussive blasts from
Mhm.
grenades and rockets and mortar fire. And this can result in things like traumatic brain injuries, or certainly if there has been a combat related injury or if somebody's watched a friend become injured or even unfortunately perish, there are problems like post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression and anxiety. So there are these very powerful mechanisms that can impact the structure of the brain and even just in a very short but intense event, like a firefight or a combat type situation, can structurally rewire the brain to the point that somebody now has a lifelong condition that they have to deal with and overcome, and it becomes a challenge and a puzzle to help them reframe, repiece, and rebuild those connections. Um, but one of the neatest features of our brain that really was not conventionally understood, at least this has been the paradigm for the last several hundred years in my field. We used to think that the brain was under a period of rapid development, when we go from birth to, I don't know, maybe early adulthood, and then that's it and it's fixed and it doesn't change again. And if you have an injury or you lose a part of it, that function's lost forever and so be it. Um, that's not true. So we come with
Okay.
this amazing ability called neuroplasticity, where
Mhm.
our brain is constantly changing and constantly rewiring itself based on the inputs that we give it, which then affect the outputs, i.e., behavior, and so on and so forth. In
Mhm.
fact, I mean, your brain, Sana, and mine, probably more so yours than mine, is different and has changed, in the short time that we've been talking on this podcast. Because as we're having a dialogue and your brain is receiving information and contemplating what to do and how to think and what to say, it's constantly restructuring itself. And when it comes to long-term change like memory formation and storage and healing, again, this gets back to sleep because the vast majority of that happens during sleep. So, again, another reason sleep is imperative. But there are very specific techniques that in supplements and in some cases certain medications and therapies that are very effective at helping people rewire around an injury or a traumatic event to elevate, to either maintain or elevate their performance. And this is something that I worked with, excuse me, service members rather in the military, and that I now do with civilians in my practice.
No, that's really, really impressive, man. Really impressive. And I think it really also, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, um, you have witnessed the extremes, and that has really, really given you that, you know, perspective that brain is such an incredible organ. Um, and I think if even if we talk about stress, um it may look different in battlefield than in an office cubicle or in our homes, but the brain doesn't always make that distinction. That's why we often talk about fight or flight mode, freeze mode, and all that. And the way you connect high performance to daily resilience, it definitely makes it more attainable. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, it was my pleasure. But you said something very important, Sana, and that's that the brain can't tell the difference between a life-threatening situation and a stressful situation at the office. And that is 100% accurate. Now, now, in some situations, you may argue that a truly life-threatening circumstance could trigger a condition like PTSD sooner, but it does not take much for it to go into that fight or flight mode and to put us in a constant state of stress with just our day-to-day lives and our jobs or whatever circumstance that we face. And and early childhood and early life conditioning plays a major role there in terms of what traumas or stressors were we exposed to when we were younger that set those pathways up in the first place. And, I mean, that's we could spend a whole 'nother podcast on that alone, I'm sure, but, recognizing and understanding, what are our past biases and what behaviors have we inherited that, again, we're not even aware of or not fully aware of, and how those, limitations are impacting our potential, is really something I would encourage people to look into, whether that's, again, learning more about how their mind works, or I know I mentioned offline earlier, that working with a therapist, for example,
Mhm.
but again, brain health and physical health are the same thing, or mental health and physical health are the same thing. And
Mhm.
without the right inputs, again, we can't change the output. And so there's some just uh, incredibly useful, validated techniques that really help people transform their life and how they show up for the world.
Totally, totally. Yeah, I mean, we are short on time, but of course, I have to touch on this, Ryan. Your book, The Incredible Brain, it came out of both your medical expertise and a deeply personal loss. So, um, how has grief reshaped the way you think about brain health and longevity? And if you can share, what readers, our listeners, they can expect from your book, The Incredible Brain.
Of course. Well, thank you for mentioning that. So again, if hopefully I've provided one or two tips on how to help, but if you are interested in learning more about how your brain and your body work and how to help maintain that health for as long as possible and elevate your performance in the process, That's
Mhm.
what's in the book. So I've done my best to distill my understanding of how these things work, and sort of the conversations I've had with my patients over the years into actionable protocols or interventions that people can consider, again, to however they choose or however they best see fit. But it gets back to those four pillars, and more. I mean, talk a little bit about supplements and where we think all of this is headed in terms of technology in the future. So there's quite a bit to explore, but I've gotten some very positive early feedback from people, and I'm very excited to get this out to the world. Um, but this whole journey was shaped by grief, and I think grief can be a very powerful tool, or maybe suffering or loss can be a powerful tool for people to really put into perspective what matters. And for me, I mean, some of my first memories in life were of attending funerals for family members, and
Mhm.
that continued well through my childhood. That got the gears turning, to make me question why bad things happen to people, how our bodies worked, and then ultimately for me to go become a doctor to try to fix it so that other people didn't have to suffer as my family members did, or as I did watching them, succumb to these diseases. And even even into adult life and into my clinical practice, I still felt so limited because, again, like I said, I just feel like I watch the same movie play out over and over again with these people
Mhm.
that come to the hospital or come to my clinic that have just unfortunately not done the right thing for a period of years. And when I say that, it's not their fault. Again, it's the kind of culmination of the circumstances that we live in and the world that we find ourselves in. But I want to give people hope that the scientific literature is now to a point where we truly understand what moves the needle on our health. And there's so many practical, approachable, either free or very low cost interventions that everybody can put in place to ensure that they live a longer, healthier life. Um, yeah, that's that's it.
Oh, that's no, that's really really thoughtful. Especially I really liked, that you mentioned that it's not their fault, but it's kind of a combination of circumstances because everybody has their unique way of coping up or facing situations. And we cannot just outrightly say that you've got to do this. It's all your fault. It's all your mistake. So it's a very considerate and compassionate approach. And I think yes, grief is a very, very powerful emotion. And that really feels deeply human. So I think brain longevity isn't just about living longer, it's about living with meaning, with purpose. So of course, Ryan, if our listeners they would like to connect with you and they would also like to get a hold of your book, The Incredible Brain, what would be the best way?
Absolutely. Um, well, for anything Transcend Health related, which is my company, anybody can head over to transcendhealthgroup.com. I'm sure we can provide that in the show notes for everyone. And there is a link for the book on that page, which is just transcendhealthgroup.com/book. But again, you can click the book link and it'll get you there either way. I mean, I do try to provide free information on social media. So we're on Instagram and LinkedIn, currently building out some free YouTube courses for people, which will be, I think, really fun. It's on brain health mastery and just kind of a basic way for everyone to take control of their health and their life. Of course, that's all in the book as well. But I really want to get this message out to as many people as I can and encourage as many people to just know that proper health is well within their control. And again, just being able to take control of your life, which I think is so important and something that we have lost touch with. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
There's still hope out there, and I'll make sure to provide all the details in the show notes for our listeners. And also, Ryan, um, any simple, like, gentlest, like most realistic place we can start with, irrespective of the age, something we can start with if, let's say we are overwhelmed if a listener is feeling overwhelmed by all of this?
First off, just to recognize that that's completely normal and that's okay. And I think most people to some degree feel overwhelmed. So giving yourself the grace and the space to be kind to yourself and understand that how we've all ended up here. But I think what probably the single easiest thing that I have found that creates an immediate change or an effect on the body is to do a basic breath work. And there's several ways people can do this, but just basic deep breathing. So this is something that the Special Forces community is trained to do. But there's square or box breathing, and that involves a slow, deep inhale through the nose for about 4 seconds. So kind of that's one side of the square. Kind of hold your breath for 4 seconds while the lungs are full of air, and then to gradually release through the mouth for 4 seconds, so until the lungs are totally expelled, and then hold on empty for 4 seconds. So if you imagine that draws a four-sided square, a box, you can do that as many times as you want, and that can be highly effective at maintaining control of our mind and our what we call our parasympathetics, our rest digest system. And the more you do that, the more in control you become, not just now, but actually in the future, because this actually helps rewire your brain toward that state, which is very helpful. And then an even quicker one is something called the physiological sigh. This is where you take a deep breath in through your nose all the way in. So as long as it takes till your lungs are full of air and you can't get any more in. And then you take a second kind of sharp inhale or like a sniff almost. And and when you do that, you just have a slow exhale throughout the mouth as the third part of the breath. And when you create that, when the lungs are full and you create that second sharp inhale, it pops open the little alveoli, which are the little kind of air-filled sacs where the gas exchange takes place in your lungs. And that actually triggers another reflex that immediately engages the parasympathetic nervous system and calms you down. So that's the quickest one I've ever found that actually immediately in the moment, if I'm ever really feeling anxious or wound up or stressed, I mean, I do that 1, 2, 3 times, and I mean, instant calm. It's very, very effective.
Yes, it is. It is very simple, actually. Very simple. Very simple. Like the way you explained, box breathing and this one as well. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you for this. And once again, I'll make sure to have all the links on the website, your book, and all the resources in the show notes for our listeners. And I couldn't thank you enough because your story, the conversation that we had today on brain health, longevity, the beauty of our brain, it shows us that grief, tragedy, it can transform into purpose, and prevention is not only possible, but it is powerful. It is empowering. So thank you so much, Ryan, for this.
Thank you, Son. It was a pleasure.
And to all the listeners out there, you know what? I absolutely now believe cognitive longevity isn't a distant dream. It is the daily commitment to care for our minds as much as we care for our bodies and our hearts. And while none of us can predict the future, we can choose every day to give our brain the best chance to carry us into it. And that's why it is called the present, the gift. So, with that, thank you for joining us on this journey, on the mindful journey. Until next time, may you find ways to protect your mind, honor your story, and live fully present in the moments that matter the most. Thank you.